Hello people, so I'm back again doing this thing as usual. I jump on these videos which are trending, I give my opinion. Hopefully drop your opinion in the comment section, like, share, subscribe. So I think I've mentioned something with regards to Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. I've spoken about those three countries. I'll be zooming in a little bit on what's happening in Kenya, the unrest in Kenya. And I just said Kenya, Nigeria, who's next?
In Kenya, people are protesting against a new finance bill that introduces unpopular tax proposals, igniting widespread anger across the nation. Demonstrators are upset with the bill, which President William Ruto argues is necessary to address heavy public debt. The controversial bill contains provisions seen as imposing extra burdens on ordinary citizens and businesses, sparking an outcry from a public already struggling with the high cost of living. Although the Kenyan government has withdrawn some of the contentious proposals, so far it has done little to alleviate public anger.
Yeah, because look at what's happening. Young Kenyans are demonstrating for their rights. They're demonstrating with flags and banners. I can't even see anymore. They're being tear gassed. They're being tear
The finance bill was introduced in Parliament earlier in May 2024 and faced intense debate last week, with opposition lawmakers supporting the angry protesters. The following is a summary of what the bill originally proposed. The initial provisions of the bill included a plan to introduce a 16% sales tax on bread and a 25% duty on cooking oil. Additionally, there was a proposed increase in the tax on financial transactions and a new annual tax on vehicle ownership amounting to 2.5% of the vehicle's value. In response to the public outcry, the government announced it would drop these measures. Another proposal in the bill was the eco-levy, intended as a charge on products contributing to e-waste and environmental harm. Critics argued that the eco-levy would increase the cost of essential items such as sanitary pads, which was considered as being largely insensitive given that many girls unable to afford these products often miss school during their periods. Babies' nappies would also be affected by the eco-levy. Following public outcry, the government announced that the levy would apply only to imported products, arguing that this would boost the growth of local industries. Another primary focus of this eco-levy is digital products such as mobile phones, cameras, recording equipment, TVs and radio devices. An increase in the cost of these products is viewed as detrimental to the growth of Kenya's digital economy, which many people depend on for their livelihoods. Lastly, the bill also suggests raising the import tax rate from 2.5% to 3% of the item's value payable by the importer at the port. This increase comes just a year after the rate was lowered from 3.5% to 2.5%. Some people in Kenya argued that the bill exacerbates existing hardships coming amidst rising food and living expenses and following previous tax hikes in 2023. They contend that these taxes would drive up overall living costs. Demonstrators assert that since President William Ruto's government took office in 2022, they have faced escalating taxes without commensurate improvements in public services. They accuse the government of using taxation not to enhance social amenities but for corrupt purposes. Meanwhile, Kenya's President William Ruto, who campaigned on promises to make life easy for Kenya's working-class hustlers, has justified the tax hike proposals, saying that they are necessary to pay off a public debt of approximately 11 trillion Kenyan shillings that Kenya is saddled with. A lot of that money is owed to China. Kenya's proposed tax hikes have sparked protests throughout the country. Last week, demonstrators brought the country to a standstill, demanding the entire bill to be scrapped. They called for widespread protests as well as a national strike to pressure the government about the bill. On Tuesday, 18 June, Parliament responded to the protests by announcing emergency changes to the bill. The chairperson of the Finance Committee would later say in a press conference that lawmakers would reverse taxes on bread, oil, vehicles, and financial transactions, including mobile money payments. Despite these amendments, protesters were not satisfied and demonstrations continued even after over 200 people were arrested on that day. On Thursday, 20 June, demonstrators tried to occupy Kenya's parliament buildings where lawmakers were meeting for a second reading of the bill.
And we start this hour in Kenya, where the security forces have clashed with hundreds of protesters opposed to tax hikes put forward by the government. Riot police, some on horseback, have been deployed in the capital, Nairobi, and have fired tear gas in an effort to disperse the demonstrators. The Parliament buildings have been cordoned off ahead of the vote by MPs on the controversial finance bill later today. Many fear the tax cuts will...
Also on social media, young people used hashtags like #RejectFinanceBill 2024 and #OccupyParliament in order to trump up support across the board and have many young people join in the protests. Despite massive demonstrations, on Tuesday, June 25, Kenyan lawmakers passed the bill. This came as no surprise, given that most of the parliament supports President Ruto's Kenya Kwanza alliance. On the same day, Tuesday 25 June, Kenyan police used live ammunition against hundreds of protesters who were trying to breach Parliament House in Nairobi. Protesters broke through barricades around Parliament and entered the complex where lawmakers were discussing the proposal, prompting police to fire live rounds.
And we start with breaking news out of Nairobi, Kenya, where ongoing protests have now inflamed further. We are learning that lawmakers in Kenya's parliament, which is on fire, have been forced to escape through an underground channel after protesters got inside the parliament building. That is according to CNN affiliate NTV Kenya.
Following this, Amnesty International reported that many people had been wounded, with some other sources estimating that at least 10 people had been killed.
Becky, we're on the street. This is one of the main streets here in Nairobi, and we see police in a truck here trying to fire tear gas at the protesters, who in many cases keep sending it back to them. The street is littered with a lot of debris, things that have come from the surrounding offices, and we're quickly getting enveloped with tear gas, as you see here, so we're going to need to move quickly. The protesters have been beaten back.
As at the time of recording, on Tuesday 25 June, Kenya's President William Ruto has not addressed the violence. And as it stands, the bill is now headed to his desk to sign.
So, but the similarity in all of these things is the lack of representation. When I look at the decision or the bill which was passed in Kenya that triggered all of these protests, I was like, what were you thinking was going to happen? And whose interest were you protecting when you were pushing for all these bills? It was definitely not this youth who are striking and some of the, should I call it, the sole proprietors and the small businesses. Also, I feel like people have the tendency of levying attacks on the segment of the society. We tax them the most, they suffer injustice the most, they are penalized the most from corruption, and then you still expect them to bear the heaviest load in the society. We saw it even during the whole bailout thing in America, where politicians took stupid decisions but now had to use taxpayers' money to bail out their companies so their companies don't crumble. They used a very logical economic decision but very illogical social decision in saying that if these companies crumble, there's more unemployment and more poverty. It makes sense, capitalist perspective, economics-wise. But it doesn't make sense in the direction that you're just making sure that the rich people stay rich after mismanaging and they're not some of the consequences, and the poor people stay poor because they've taken more of their money to bail out more people, the rich. So that's what's happening in Kenya. And also, I feel like the bill, at times, some of these are bills and policies are handed to our leaders. They just come and read it. They don't even, if you ask them a technical question about those bills, they'll not even be able to answer. And hence, that's why you see there's always a time some misunderstanding because they cannot explain those bills very well. There's no convincing argument as to those bills. You can see that was not developed from in-house of our kitchens. It was just handed to them like, guys, I'll give you this 10 billion, pass this bill. They did not work on it and not the ones that build those bills. When I see the way American Congress at times argue, deliberate on some of these bills, you actually, even you who is not a master of it, so you get to understand what they're talking about. Power bills in Africa now is just handed there, and then somebody who has received their money, those who are voting votes. It's just very, I don't know how to explain it, but Africans, young people, usually who knows exactly what I'm talking about. I also feel like there's an issue with corruption, communication, and constituencies. Hence, the people feel not represented, and then they rise up like this. And also, I feel like this tendency of African leaders trying to respond with force, we know it doesn't work. You do it, people will rise up. What will happen is either you have to give in, or those who put you in power will see that you no longer represent people you should represent, and they'll kick you out. So you should look for a more political way of doing it to manipulate the people if that's what you want to do. But force never works. It's a very short-term solution, and it's not even a solution. So I just feel like we should learn from those things. I'm seeing what's happening in Nigeria, what's happening in Kenya, and I feel like it's just a testament or an indicator of the times we're in. And for those who are watching things closely, you better just be putting in place your own stones. By stones, I mean putting your blocks. Not because stones might sound identified. Blocks is to build. Put in place your own blocks to build the things you want to build, knowing that the change we have always said is coming. So as usual, it's your boy Ambassador. Like, share, comment, most especially comment. Your opinion matters.
Just my opinion.